My sister stole my boyfriend, said he's mine now. I let them have each other. But now they're miserable, and I'm winning. Growing up in Wilmington, North Carolina, I used to love the oak-lined streets, the smell of salt in the air, and the comfortable familiarity of it all. Now, standing outside my childhood home after years away, I felt strange. It wasn't exactly nostalgic, nor was it fully bitter. It was complicated. I'd left Wilmington nearly 10 years ago to pursue my career as an architectural consultant in Seattle. And I thought I'd left all that childhood baggage behind me for good. Until the call came from Dad. "Willow, I need you," he'd said, his voice rough and low, like he hadn't slept in days. "Your mom. She took a spill, broke her hip. We're managing, but it's hard, you know? Maisie's got work, and I'm not as strong as I used to be." That last part cut deep. My dad, Jonah Mathis, the former Marine who'd once single-handedly pulled a neighbor's car out of a ditch, admitting he wasn't as strong as he used to be? That shook me. So, I put my life in Seattle on pause and flew out. I told myself it was just for a month, maybe 2. Just long enough to get Mom back on her feet and Dad feeling less overwhelmed. But part of me sensed it would be anything but simple. When I walked through the door that evening, I was met with a wave of old memories: the worn leather couch, the same dark wood coffee table with a chip in the corner from where Maisie had crashed her tricycle into it as a kid. Maisie. Just the thought of her made my stomach twist. My younger sister and I hadn't been close in years, though we were once thick as thieves. She was the extroverted family darling, the one who breezed through social situations with charm and ease. And me? I was the one who worked hard, the serious one who spent more time with her nose in a book than socializing. After I'd hugged Dad and checked on Mom upstairs, I found Maisie lounging in the living room, scrolling through her phone. Her hair was done up in loose waves, and she had on this perfectly fitted dress that made her look like she was ready for a magazine shoot, not sitting at home. "Look who finally decided to come home," she said, barely looking up from her screen. "Good to see you too, Maisie." I forced a smile, trying to keep things civil. "Well, you've missed a lot," she replied, slipping her phone into her bag. "Life doesn't stop just because you're not here." "Never thought it did," I replied. Maisie grinned, ignoring my attempt to be polite. "Guess what?" she said, her eyes brightening. "I met someone. He's amazing. Like, finally, someone who gets me." "Oh yeah? That's great, Maisie," I said, trying to sound enthusiastic. I'd heard variations of this story before. Maisie was always in love with someone, and it always ended in drama. "No, really, Willow. This one's different. He's my one and only," she declared, eyes shining. "Well, I hope he's the real deal," I said, meaning it, despite my skepticism. A few days later, Maisie brought her one and only over for dinner. I remember opening the door to see him standing on the porch, a tall, dark-haired guy in a neat button-up shirt, looking vaguely uncomfortable. "Willow, meet Evan," Maisie said, pulling him forward like he was a prize she'd won. "Nice to meet you, Evan," I said, offering my hand. He shook it, his grip firm but a little hesitant. His eyes met mine for a second too long, and I felt this. "I don't know, spark?" I brushed it off as first meeting awkwardness. Dinner was mostly pleasant. Maisie kept talking about her latest work achievements, occasionally throwing in lines like, "Willow wouldn't know, she's been gone too long." Dad rolled his eyes each time, clearly tired of her digs. Evan mostly stayed quiet, giving short responses whenever someone tried to pull him into the conversation. But every now and then, I'd catch him looking at me with this strange intensity. I chalked it up to nervousness. Then, about 2 weeks later, things took a turn. I was in the backyard, cleaning up some old gardening tools when I heard the back gate creak open. Evan stepped in, hands shoved in his pockets, looking like he was ready to bolt. "Hey, Evan. Maisie's inside," I said, straightening up. "I know," he replied, taking a deep breath. "I actually came to talk to you." A part of me felt a pang of worry. Is something wrong? No. Well, yes. I don't know. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling to find the right words. "Willow, I need to be honest. This is gonna sound crazy, but I think I made a mistake." "A mistake?" I asked, my voice wary. "Yes." He took a step closer, his gaze earnest and intense. "I think I should have been with you. You and I. We make more sense. I feel this connection with you that I don't feel with Maisie." "Evan, are you serious right now?" I couldn't help the shock in my voice. He stepped even closer, his face earnest. "Willow, I know it sounds insane. I know you must think I'm out of my mind, but I can't shake it. I feel like I'm supposed to be with you." I took a step back, holding up my hands. "Evan, you're with my sister. Whatever this is, it needs to stop. Now." But before I could get another word out, the back door swung open. There stood Maisie, her face twisted in a look of pure rage. "So this is what you've been up to?" She spat, her voice venomous. "Flirting with my boyfriend behind my back?" "Maisie, it's not what you think," I tried to explain, but she wasn't listening. "You've always hated me, Willow. You can't stand it when I have something good, can you?" "That's not true," I protested, feeling my voice crack. "Maisie, I didn't, Evan just showed up here," I told him to back off. "Oh, so you're saying it's all his fault? That's rich, Willow. Real rich." She let out a bitter laugh, her eyes glittering with accusation. Evan tried to step in, his face stricken. "Maisie, please, listen. Shut up, Evan," she yelled, her voice shaking. "You've both humiliated me." She stormed back into the house, slamming the door behind her, leaving Evan and me standing there in stunned silence. I turned to him, my voice cold. "You've done enough damage, Evan. Just go." The days that followed were pure hell. Maisie turned the whole situation around, making it sound like I'd been the one pursuing Evan. She told my parents, who were already overwhelmed with Mom's recovery, and I could feel the shift in the house. Mom barely looked at me, and Dad just shook his head whenever he saw me. Maisie's bitterness spilled over into everything. She started leaving little digs every time she saw me. "You've always thought you were better than me, haven't you, Willow?" she'd say, whenever we crossed paths. "Miss Seattle success. Well, I hope you're happy. You've got everything now, including the man I love." "Maisie, I'm not interested in Evan," I told her, trying to keep my voice steady. "But you can't just twist this around to suit your narrative." "Oh, there it is. Willow, the noble victim," she sneered, eyes flashing. "You always play the martyr. But everyone sees through it. You're just selfish, Willow. Always have been." After weeks of this, I finally lost it. "You know what, Maisie? I'm done trying to keep the peace with you. If you want Evan, take him. But stop dragging me through the mud to justify your insecurities." She stared at me, open-mouthed, then scoffed. "You're just jealous because he's choosing me." I didn't say another word. Instead, I packed my bags that night, booked a hotel for my last week in town, and planned my exit. But of course, Maisie had to have the last word. 2 weeks after I got back to Seattle, I saw her engagement announcement on social media. A professionally lit photo of her and Evan, beaming with happiness, the caption reading, "He's mine forever." Guess some things are just meant to be. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. The wedding invite came in the mail a month later. Against my better judgment, I attended. I watched Maisie walk down the aisle in Asheville, looking radiant, the picture-perfect bride. But during the vows, Evan's voice trembled, and he glanced at me. Just for a second, but it was enough. At the reception, Maisie cornered me again, as I knew she would. "Enjoying the view?" she sneered, a cruel smile twisting her lips. "Maisie, give it a rest. You've won, okay? You've got him. Oh, don't act so high and mighty. Evan wanted you first, and you know it." Her words stunned me, and for a moment, I couldn't respond. I finally managed, "Maisie, if you're so insecure about your own husband, that's on you." With that, I walked out, leaving her standing there in the glow of the reception lights, surrounded by friends who adored her. Months passed. I went back to my life, my job, my city. Then, late one night, Evan called me. I hesitated before picking up, and when I did, his voice was raw, full of desperation. "She's driving me crazy, Willow. She's convinced I'm still in love with you. She checks my phone, watches me like a hawk. I can't take it anymore." "Evan, you made your choice," I said, cutting him off. "You chose the drama. I told you then, I wasn't interested." I hung up and blocked his number, feeling a strange sense of closure. And whenever I think about those two now, I can't help but smile. I'm free, living my own life, while they're stuck in their tangled web of insecurities. Winning isn't always about coming out on top. Sometimes, it's just about getting out. A year went by after that wedding, and I went on with my life in Seattle, pouring myself into my work and growing my network. It felt good to have my space back, to not have every day loaded with family drama or Maisie's endless jabs. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace, like I could breathe again. But, of course, peace never lasts in the Mathis family. One Friday evening, I was finishing up some client paperwork when my phone buzzed with a text from Maisie. My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard from her in months and was almost hoping it would stay that way. "Willow. We need to talk. Please call me." Just seeing her name made my pulse quicken. I debated ignoring her, telling myself I didn't need to get dragged back into her orbit, but something told me this was different. Against my better judgment, I took a deep breath and dialed her number. She picked up after the first ring. "Willow, finally. I didn't think you'd call." Her voice had none of the usual sass or superiority. Instead, she sounded defeated. Maisie, what's going on? I asked, keeping my tone guarded. There was a long pause, and I could hear her take a shaky breath. I'm in Seattle. Can we meet up? The last thing I wanted was to sit across from my sister in some coffee shop, hashing out whatever mess she'd gotten herself into. But something about her voice was different this time, so I agreed. We met at a little cafe near my apartment. She looked worn out, her usual polish gone, her hair was messy, her makeup barely there, and she wore a sweater that was 2 sizes too big for her. She looked like a shadow of the Maisie I'd last seen at her wedding. She fidgeted with her coffee cup, staring down at the table. Evan left, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. For a second, I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, another part of me felt like this was the universe finally setting things straight. But I swallowed my feelings and forced myself to listen. I tried so hard to make it work, she continued, her hands shaking slightly as she gripped her coffee. But he was always distant. And I could never let go of the thought that he wanted you. She looked up at me then, her eyes rimmed red. I drove myself crazy over it, Willow. I just kept thinking. Why wasn't I good enough? Maisie, I started, choosing my words carefully, you made your choice when you married him. Whatever was between him and me was never real. I told you that. She nodded, swallowing hard. I know, but I guess I couldn't help but see you as competition. I always felt like I was just playing catch-up with you. Mom and Dad would brag about how well you were doing, how you got the good job, the nice apartment. I just wanted to win, just once. So when Evan showed interest in you, it felt like the ultimate betrayal. I let her words sink in. For years, Maisie's resentment had been simmering under the surface, but I'd never realized how deeply she felt like she was competing with me. And as much as I'd like to say I hadn't noticed, I had, her little digs, her need to flaunt every small success, her constant need for validation. And yet, here she was, admitting it to me, broken and vulnerable. What happened with you two, then? I asked, more softly this time. Maisie let out a sad, humorless laugh. We fought constantly. He accused me of being paranoid, and I accused him of still having feelings for you. It got toxic, fast. He'd come home late, avoid talking, and I'd get more and more suspicious. It was like I was obsessed with you. I hated it. It was painful to hear, but in a way, it was also freeing. Maisie had clung to this resentment, this need to win over me, to her own detriment. So what now? I asked her. She looked at me, her expression raw and full of pain. I don't know, Willow. I have to start over, I guess. But I'm scared. She let out a shaky breath. Maybe it's too late. It's not too late, Maisie, I said, surprising even myself with how genuine I sounded. Look, you've always been good with people, better than I ever was. I think you just let that turn into something toxic. But it's not too late to fix things. Maybe you just need to focus on yourself. She looked up at me, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Do you really think I can? Yes, but it's up to you. You can't keep holding on to this competition that only exists in your head. If you want a fresh start, you have to let it all go. Maisie was quiet for a long moment, nodding slowly. You know, Willow, I've spent so much time thinking you were the one who had it easy, that you had it all figured out. But I see now I was just pushing you away. I didn't even know who I was. For the first time, I saw Maisie as someone vulnerable, someone who'd let her insecurities turn into a battle that she felt she had to win. In that moment, I understood her more than I ever had before, and as strange as it was, I felt a wave of sympathy. She was my sister, after all. As we walked out of the cafe, I gave her a hug. It was awkward, but it felt necessary. Good luck, Maisie, I whispered. I hope you find what you're looking for. She pulled back, tears in her eyes. Thank you, Willow. For everything. We went our separate ways that night. She stayed in Seattle for a while, working on herself and figuring out who she was outside of Evan, outside of our tangled sibling rivalry. We didn't stay in touch constantly, but the occasional text here and there reminded me she was making progress, slowly but surely. About 6 months later, I got another text from her. Thank you for meeting me that night. I'm doing a lot better now. I hope you're well too. It was short, simple, but it was everything. Maisie and I didn't need to be best friends, but we were finally free of the toxic cycle that had torn us apart for so long. In a way, Evan had been the catalyst we both needed, not to drive us apart, but to finally push us to see each other as flawed, real people instead of rivals. And me? I moved on too. I found peace knowing that I could have my own life, far away from the drama that had once consumed us both. Sometimes winning isn't about getting ahead of someone else. It's about finally letting go, healing, and finding a way forward without the weight of old wounds. For the first time in years, I felt truly free, and I think Maisie did too.